let's go start making some cool stuff in search. So search.jsx, while this is a my defined component, we'll be expanding this a little bit. And we're going to import our preload data. So we're going to say import preload from /data. Right? If you remember, we have that data.json file. If you need a refresher of what it looks like, this is what it looks like. It's just a bunch of metadata about TV shows. Okay, and then we're going to create a div. Its class name equals search. And yeah, if you want to, you can do something that's kind of useful sometimes to do is you can use a pre-encode to view JSON output. This is just a debugging trick that I've used a bunch and honestly stole from Ryan Florence, the creator of React Router, and he also does a front-end master's course. So all this is going to do is it's going to pre-format and print out whatever is in preload. So if we refresh here, oh, I probably shut that down. Can't resolve ./data. Oh, it's going to be ./data. Looks like ESLint is going to require that we put .json on there, so put .json. And now, hopefully, if you go refresh here, you can see this is what our data looks like. So that trick that I showed you with the JSON stringify and pre-encode, that's really useful if you're not sure what props are coming in or how your state's changing over time. It's just a really useful way to dump a bunch of data to the DOM really quick. Cool, so now that we have that, let's actually go and print out all of our shows. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to want to print out the title for every show individually. We want to make it into an H3. What we have is we have an array of show data, right? And we want to transform that into an array of show components of some sort. So for those of you that have any functional programming background, some bells should be going off in your head of what you should do here, right? If we're transforming one array from array of one thing to an array of another thing, that's a map, right? That's an all-day map. So that's what we're going to be using here. And this is actually one of my favorite points about React, is most of React is just JavaScript. Now it seems kind of obvious to say that out loud, but I mean that in the regard of, I'm going to pick on Angular just because that's the one I know, and I'm talking about old Angular, right? Angular 1 and before. There was a lot of domain-specific language in Angular, right? You had to know how to do an ng4, and those were very specific Angular skills. And then once you moved on from Angular, those skills no longer applied, right? You can't do ng4 with Ember. It doesn't make any sense. What I like about React is, for the most part, it's just JavaScript, right? There's very little specific, domain-specific language for React itself. There is some. I'm not denying that there isn't some, right? Knowing to put class name in there, it's annoying, right? It's a very React-specific thing to do. But I'm getting on to say that we're going to be using array map here to do what ng4 does in Angular and what pound each does in Ember, right? So let's take a look at what that actually looks like. We're going to do preload .shows .map, and I'm going to say show and for now we're just going to return an H3 with show dot title. So Prettier took it away. But what I had here was this. So this right here in the map, this is just a normal arrow function, right? We're taking a show, right? Well, let's go back and talk about map for just a moment, right? So preload.shows is an array, right? We're going to take that array and we're going to call map on it. And what that does is it's going to call this function right here once on every element. Whatever this function returns is going to be returned in a new array, right? So we're going to take this array, which is an array of objects, and we're going to transform it into an array of React components. Cool? We cool so far with that idea? Now, if you remember what I referenced very briefly earlier, React knows what to do with an array of elements, right? So if we give it an array of elements, it knows how to render those. So that's precisely what we're doing, is we're giving it an array of elements. Okay? So that's what's going on here. Now, particularly with arrow functions, if you have exactly one parameter, no more, no less, the parentheses around the parameters are optional. So as soon as I save this, it's going to take away these parentheses. That's where they're going. It's Prettier that takes them away. Okay, so now if I come back here, you'll notice that I have a bunch of H3s on the page. Any questions about that?
Is it best practice to pull out the preload.shows into like another JSX variable and then put it inside the div, or is this still, I don't know, would you consider like doing the map function inside the div to be best practice?
I mean, it definitely depends on what you're doing. I mean, another beautiful point about React is it's not really super specific about what it wants you to break into components and what not. I found when I was first writing React, I had a tendency to break things down into just tiny, tiny, tiny components to the point that it was no longer useful, right? Because things were made up of too many components and just didn't really make a lot of sense. So now I try and break them down into like atomic objects. In fact, that's what you're beating me to my punch here, jerk. No, I'm just kidding. That we're going to build a component in here, and then I'm going to comment to you that this is too big and we should break it into two components. So let's go make it too big first, and then we'll break it into two components. But like for now, like this is a tiny component. Like if this was all this was doing, yeah, this is great. Let's just leave it that way, right? There's no hard and fast rules like if there's a map, then you must do this. I don't know. Someone might make that rule. I don't. Like I just try and do what's sane, right? I find those dogmatic rules typically don't serve you in the long run.